Hmm.
Welcome to the Positive Sports Podcast. I'll be your host this afternoon, Ed Montana. As you can see alongside me today, I don't have my brother Alex as normal. Instead, I have my buddy Victor Rodriguez from Bloody Elbow. For those of you who don't know Bloody Elbow, it's an online MMA magazine. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, we've been called an online karate magazine at one point, so I guess we can go with that. Sure, why not?
Yeah. So as you can well imagine, today it's not going to be about all the normal stick and ball sports. It's going to be a lot of MMA talk between Victor and I. Hey, Victor, before we get started, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a background on you, where you're from, and how you got into this MMA thing?
Yeah, okay. So I was born in New York, and I moved to Dominican Republic at maybe 13, 14, and basically, this was the mid '90s. It was kind of hard for you to be able to watch the earlier UFCs. It was if you're old enough, and I know we're dating ourselves here. For you to be able to watch on VHS, no less, because I mean, even though Betamax was the superior format, it didn't hold much on that taste. But for you to watch this stuff, you had to be like at a very specific rental place, and they'd stash the fight stuff where the porn stuff was, or like where Faces of Death. You had to know somebody or trade tapes with somebody. It was a hassle, right? So you didn't have the same kind of freedoms that you have now. So I was instantly thrilled at seeing this thing, because like this was real fighting. I grew up watching Bruce Lee and Jean-Claude Van Damme and Jackie Chan, and you think this is okay, this is fighting. You love watching fight movies, but you're not really used to seeing people actually throw hands. You don't really know what that's like, and you get a very rude awakening. So the early UFCs were a very obscure thing that I kind of gravitated to, but I didn't really get to see much of. And then the early odds come around, and I'm living in Dominican Republic, and every once in a while, if you just roll the dice and you put certain channel on, they'd have a few fights on from Pride. And Pride is a different beast, because as a massive pro wrestling fan, this was to me something of a bridge. Number one, they're in a ring, but number two, they're actually doing suplexes and shit. Like, they're doing stuff that you didn't really see as much in the UFC, and the aesthetic was much cleaner and brighter, and these guys were presented as true stars, whereas in the UFC, it was like they were recording it under a barn somewhere. You know what I mean? It was just weird. Like, if it wasn't the UFC, it was some other also ran organization that was putting on these just very grungy, dirty looking. I get what they were going for with that, but it just wasn't appealing to me. But Pride had this thing going, and
Yeah.
I became as big a fan as I am now, largely because of that. And once I moved back to the States, I kind of start getting bored with pro wrestling and getting much more into MMA, and I couldn't really hold the attention. My attention span wouldn't allow me to follow both, so I just stuck with MMA. And I gravitated to a little site called Bloody Elbow. I was just commenting and became a moderator, and then an analyst doing previews, and now I'm also a writer doing podcasting.
That's awesome. That's great. It's funny. I don't actually know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask you on air because I know, some people like to protect that.
I'm not telling.
Some people like to protect
That's
that
okay.
kind of information, but I actually stumbled onto MMA through The Ultimate Fighter. So my wife was pregnant with my son, and of course she wanted to sleep all the time, and I couldn't sleep because I was always nervous. So I would watch a lot of The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
And to see those actual fights, again, like you, right? I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I watched a lot of those kung fu movies on Saturday afternoon on TV, and, boxing on ABC's Wide World of Sports. And then it kind of went away, and it just kind of morphed into wrestling, which is obviously fake fighting. And then when I got The Ultimate Fighter and I got back to seeing some real fighting, I was like, wow. In fact, my son was born the Thursday before the first Ultimate Fighter finale.
Wow.
Not the actual finale, the pay-per-view, right, where Liddell and Couture met.
Yes. Where the coaches, yes.
Yeah, where the coaches fought, right? And so me being the wonderful father and husband that I am, I brought my son home from the hospital, made sure everything was cozy in the house, and then went to the local bar to watch the
Oh man.
pay-per-view and smoke cigars with a couple of buddies and watch fights. And to this day, here we are, 250 numbered UFCs, right? The pay-per-views,
Hmm.
250 something of them. And I go out every single one. I go out to a bar, and it is truly a melting pot, right? I'm a runner. I have a job. I've got other friends. My son plays baseball. I've got friends through there, and that's the one place where they all come together. So I got one of my running buddies
Yeah.
shows up. My son's baseball coach shows up. My brother shows up. I've just got all these people. They're all connected to me, but then they all come because they all like watching the fights, and we all sit at a bar and watch the fights once a month. It's really and I love it. I love it. I
Yeah.
hate to sound like a UFC shill here, but it's as real as it gets, right?
No, no, not at all. No, but I get what you mean. There's a sense. Look, it's more than just the fights themselves. There's a communal experience and a sense of a sense of ceremony and companionship there. Like I don't have that. So I mean, it's like I'm happy to hear that for you that's an experience. Because I used to actually we used to live in an apartment building in West Philly, and we didn't have cable back then because it just wasn't worth it at the time for the cost and everything, and the cabling was old, so all we had was DSL. So
Mm.
watching a pay-per-view on online was just not worth it at the time. And I was off on Saturday night. So what I would do is I'd go down to Applebee's in Center City, down on 15th Street. They were actually allowing to, they have things. I'd order some wings, have a Guinness, and that was kind of cool. Maybe every once in a while meet somebody who had more of an idea what it was. There weren't too many dedicated people. The fullest I ever saw that place was Brock Lesnar fighting Cain Velasquez, and that was actually my wife came with me to that one because she's not really like it's weird for someone who doesn't really watch or follow the sport like that. She understands it a lot better than some people that do every day.
Right.
But that's another combo. But it's interesting. Like you had that place like once they stopped showing fights at Applebee's, I stopped going to Applebee's, and life changed, and eventually you get your own. You start buying the events or whatever, or not buying them. Wink. But it's cool that you have that avenue there, and that you've sort of. I mean, this is a while ago. This is over 10 years ago. So there's this sort of thing just keeps growing. You have, I assume you'll be able to take your son once he's allowed to go in
Yeah.
to join you at the bar, and that'll be a cool thing to add as well. So that's that made me happy to hear. I'm glad that that's a thing you have.
It's funny. He sees me heading out on a Saturday night. Especially when he was a little bit younger. He's 14 now. Now he knows he's not going. But when he was 8 or 10 years old, he's like, "Hey, can I go?" And I'm like, "Nah, son, this ain't your kind of place, kid. They don't have a playground here, so you're not allowed to go."
A playground that has a beer tap that'll work. Yeah,
That's
cool.
right. Yeah,
It's like this isn't the Kool-Aid man. The Kool-Aid man got Hennessy in him.
Yeah, and it's great. I got some friends that I only see once a month, and it's for the fights. I got a buddy.
Yeah.
I got one particular buddy that he makes it out to all the fights. He's a huge UFC fan as well, and I only see him once a month. It's for the fight. So it's really become a glue to some of my friends that I really enjoy and really wouldn't trade it for anything. Hey, look, we just got through a nutty 2020. I know I'm the first person to say that. No one else has said that 2020 was crazy. But I'm going to say it here first. And the UFC was no different. The UFC is certainly not immune to the global pandemic that we experienced in 2020 and really continue to experience now. Just off the top of your head, your favorite fight of 2020?
Oh, that's easy. That's it's got to be Wiley Jean versus Joanna. I mean, that's just everything was out there. True grit, heart, determination, technique, everything. Man, I really thought that Joanna. I don't want to say that like she's not done. I don't think she's shot, but a lot of her game had been figured out. A lot of the talent had finally caught up to her in terms of technique, in terms of athleticism, in terms of having coaches that are able to accurately break down her game and prepare their fighters to be able to take her out. Look, when Rose Namajunas knocked her out, I didn't see it coming. Well, fair enough. Joanna didn't see it either. But the point is that that was the moment where I was like, oh, okay, the game really, as it does with everyone, where it catches up to everyone, like that's when it really, really was branded in my brain. Like that's it. This division is wide open right now. And then you saw that there was the rematch with Rose. Rose won. It was close, but it was a lovely fight. It was just arguably one of the best women's fights of all time. That's followed by Andrade taking the belt, and then Wiley taking the belt. And it's not necessarily a matter of there being a level of chaos in the division, but it's just a sense that that's how good they are. You know, the
Yeah.
UFC brought in women off the back of Ronda Rousey at 135, but real talent, the real majority of the true, like the wealth and concentration of talent in women's MMA is at 115. And you could
Yeah.
argue as well as 105. But of course, UFC is not going to pay any sort of attention to that.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I thought it was funny at the end of the year when we got the awesome draw between Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, how people started talking about that being the greatest fight of the year. And I was like, look, I understand that it just happened a day ago, but y'all can't forget what happened back in March or February, whenever that was, whenever Weili Zhang and Joanna put on it's just a masterful performance. And to go a step further with Joanna, we saw it happen to Ronda Rousey where she came in and, she had, there's a little something different about her style that's not quite MMA, right? She's got that judo background that kind of makes her a bit of an anomaly, even if she was on the male side, she would be a bit of an anomaly, kind of like a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, where the style is just so different that it kind of, it's kind of hard to figure out. But you add in the um, the talent gap, and she was dominant in a time where there really wasn't much there. And I thought maybe the same thing might happen to Joanna especially after the first Rose fight, where she kind of chalked it up to weight cutting problems and stuff like that. I thought, oh, this sounds like she's going down that path. But she's come back, she's rebuilt herself. She lost again to Rose in a very close fight, and then lost a close fight with Valentina. Not razor thin, but still lost another fight to Valentina,
Yeah,
but put up a great fight. And then that fight with
yeah,
Weili Zhang, wow. I mean, I knew what Joanna was in terms of talented and tough, but I didn't know that much about Weili Zhang. She just hadn't been out there that much. I knew she was very athletic and certainly could hit like a ton of bricks. But man, that performance she put on with Joanna, I thought she won the fight pretty. To me, it was pretty clear that she won the fight. I thought it was easy 3-2, but it was still, there were some rounds in there that were very close. Could have swung the other way, I guess, especially with MMA judging. But at the end of the day, just incredible technique, incredible grit, incredible courage. Because looking at Joanna's head, it takes courage to walk back out there. I've always said it's not the
she had the lumps like this. She had the Hellboy stumps,
yeah. I mean,
both of them on one side, basically.
she looked like a Martian. I mean, it was terrible. And I've often said this about anything that's difficult. Doing it the first time is not difficult. It's going back the second time and knowing what you're in for. And for Joanna to go into that fight with Wiley and continue to fight and press forward in the third, fourth, and fifth round, after having been through tough 5-round wars with Rose and with Valentina, to me that takes a whole new level of courage, right? Like, it's kind of like going to the doctor, right? When you get the first shot, you're like, oh crap, that hurts. And then when you have to go back for the second shot, it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on, I know this is gonna hurt, and I want no part of it.
Yeah,
And that's what Joanna
yeah.
did. I mean, it was incredible. On the men's side, since we agreed on that one, what would you say is the fight of 2020 and on the men's side?
I don't. That's a tougher one, I guess. I mean, I'd have to say like my favorite performance of the year was Adesanya versus Costa. Now it's not a close fight. I wouldn't say it's the fight of the year. Just my favorite singular performance that stood out for various reasons. You have the narrative of this bully, because let's face it, that's what Costa is, and there's
Yeah.
no ifs, ands, or buts regarding that. Taking on this slick and smooth young dude who's been a passionate martial artist from an early age, but he's also got this, you know, he's got this brat attitude because, you know, his outwardly facing persona is one thing, but then you see him revere his parents and show the proper cultural reverence to them. Like there's layers to this guy. He feels so real, and yet
Yeah.
somehow at the same time has all of these superstar qualities. And he comes in with a fair amount of hype. First performance in the UFC, you know, impressive, not super stunning, but then after that, he just starts styling on dudes. Brunson called him skinny, punishes him. Now Costa ends up calling him skinny, and it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna see what's really good. And we saw that this powerhouse Brazilian, who is built like a GI Joe, who looks like $1,000,000. Once he ran out of answers for that 1-2, and he realized he couldn't just bum rush this guy, you realize that there were levels to this game. You realize that that level of fight IQ, as my buddy Eddie Mercado calls it, fight IQ. You know what I mean? Like, once you see that and you understand, okay, now you see this sense of dread on Costa's face when he's found that he has these limitations as a mortal. You understand? There's just something very visceral about that to me. There was so much that was unspoken, yet was very loud to me, and that moment that didn't even, these fights that didn't even, or these rounds that didn't even go the whole way, like something about that just really resonated with me very strongly. And then seeing the way that Adesanya put him away, it almost made it look like nothing in the final sequence, you know, not the
Yeah.
entirety of the fight, just that final last, you know, minute and a half. He was just pulling away, and he knew it, man. He made sure with his body language that he was letting this guy know that he wasn't on that level. And that just, I, I can't really put it into words. It was just, it's the sentiment that I would have when I see Anderson Silva stunning on some of the opposition that he really shined against, like when he fought Yushin Okami. You know, not necessarily when he put Okami away, but that final few seconds of the first round, when he just, when it became very clear that he had processed everything Okami did, and he saw that this guy is nothing but a really solid jab and a good double leg. And he let him know. Again, he, you know, moved and he shucked and he kicked. And when he landed that final head kick at the end of the round, almost at the bell, you said, oh no. The fight
Yeah.
isn't over, but the tide and the momentum were very heavily on one end. And Adesanya had exactly that. And that's, I think, to me, the singular most intense and brilliant performance for that, when you take all of these things considered in the aggregate, you know? But as far as like a close fight that I can think, I mean, I'd probably say Dustin versus Dan Hooker. That
Oh,
was a very prolonged battle of attrition that I really, you know, I was going for Dustin as much as I love both of them. I really felt that Dustin was going to win it. I felt it was his time, but man, it was tough. It was tough to watch because he didn't want either guy to lose.
yeah. Yeah. Look, when you use big words like visceral, you almost changed my mind that it was Adesanya Costa. But for me, uh, that Justin Gaethje Tony Ferguson fight, maybe, and part of it, I guess, is the circumstances, right? It was kind of the first pay per view back from the pandemic, and and while it wasn't particularly close, we did have some moments where we thought Ferguson would win early in the fight. He stunned Justin Gaethje a couple times, but then again, you see Justin Gaethje, a guy who, you know, just a true warrior, the kind of guy that really belonged. Remember the UFC pay-per-views years ago where they had the guy in the Coliseum, you know, dressed in the old Roman gladiator
Yeah,
garb with the dirt in his
yeah,
hand.
yeah.
Like that's the
I
kind of
hated
warrior
that.
that
Good
Justin
God.
Gaethje was, right? And then on the other side, to see Tony Ferguson not only withstand that, but to continue to push forward. I mean, the guy really didn't take any steps back until the very end when he was literally knocked out on his feet. And when the fight was stopped, and it was, to me, stopped probably 20 seconds too late. So it's not like it was stopped early. The guy never went
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
You know, Ferguson
yeah.
never hit the deck. He took every single bit of that beating from Justin Gaethje and did not go down, which to me was incredible. So for both guys, it was, you know, just an incredible fight. The Poirier Hooker fight that you mentioned was great. Going back to Adesanya, Adesanya does have a little bit of that Anderson Silva quality to him where he figures it out in the first round or so of a fight. And then there's a point in almost all of his fights, except for Yoel Romero, because Yoel kind of didn't come to fight. But in almost all of his fights, there's a moment in time where you can literally see Adesanya go, okay, I've got this puzzle figured out. Let me just put the final pieces together. He did the same thing to Robert Whittaker, and the only reason he didn't finish it in the first round is because he figured it out at the very tail end of that first round. And you just knew going into the second round that Robert Whittaker was not going to be there for the long haul, and that's one tough son of a bitch, and he made him look. I mean, he made him look easy, really. There's a lot of talk from Costa and his camp about, maybe he had some issues and this, that, and wanting to run it back. I understand there's a bit of a language barrier there, but
no, there's not. No, there's not. No, they know what they're doing, bro. Trust me. Like, I understand Portuguese quite well and speak a good amount. So no, there's nothing lost in terms of context. Or the only difference there is what level of reality are you operating on?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, if you haven't figured it out, listener, is that Costa's delusional. He wants that rematch right away, and this and that. I'm not making excuses, but litany of excuses. The Johnny Hendricks playbook. Yeah. Nobody wants to hear that shit, dude. Like, you're not going to get an immediate rematch. Stop that. You got to fight somebody else now. And just focus on that and move.
Yeah, where does he go from here, though? Because, he fought Yoel Romero, big bad guy. Where exactly does he go here? Because I almost feel like unless he absolutely starches guys, he's not going to be impressive enough to overcome really being picked apart by Adesanya such that he would get a title rematch.
Right. So there's a few pieces at play here, and I'm glad you brought that up because he is in a curious position. He did the smartest thing so far that he's done since the loss to Adesanya was call out Robert Whittaker. I love the match because personally, either one of them with a win could easily find himself in a title situation, right?
You think so?
The number one contender. Easily, potentially. Look, there's a lot of moving pieces as well. Look, who else is out there right now at middleweight? Romero is out of the picture as he's shoved off the Bellator. It's very possible that there may not be anyone else, and that the winner here could, if they are impressive enough, as you stated, they might end up getting another title shot. It's going to be tough because Whittaker did lose that in as devastating a manner. But then again, so did Costa. Like, it's not like either one of these guys lost twice to Israel and they'd be shut out forever. Other than that, maybe Cannonier with another win, but he just got outclassed by Whittaker too. So, like, he'd probably be 2 wins away, if that. I'm not sure, but I would still think that this is the biggest name that he can fight right now that is positioned well enough that with a win, he could have a stronger case. Not a guarantee, but a stronger case to get himself back into the title picture. And that's still assuming that Adesanya sticks around, because now he's moving up to fight at light heavyweight against Jan Blachowicz. Suppose he wins the title there, he may very well relinquish the 185 belt. As much as fighters like the idea of having 2 straps, it's not always in the UFC's best interest because of their desire to schedule more fights more frequently. It ceases to keep the kind of activity and flow going that they would need to keep a champion on each one of their pay-per-views, which is a tactic they've so doggedly stuck to.
Yeah. Now, going back to Adesanya a little bit, if we're talking about Whittaker and Costa, I almost feel that they both need 2 wins in order to, I guess if one of them is super impressive against the other, then yeah. But I almost feel like they need 2 wins because they were dominated so much by Adesanya. Remember, Costa went 2 rounds with Adesanya, right?
Right.
And Whittaker went 2 rounds. So they didn't even make it to the championship rounds with Adesanya. And so they got pieced up pretty good. It's hard for me to imagine that they'll want to, that the UFC will want to get him in there. On the other side, you've got Adesanya, who, of all the people that are doing the champ thing, I think he's the most likely to do both divisions, simply because I don't think he's going to bulk up a whole lot to 205. I think he's going to walk
Yeah,
into the
he's probably going to
cage.
cut less. Yeah.
I don't think he's going to cut anything. From what I've heard, he's going to probably weigh around 200 pounds and walk into the cage at 200 pounds, which is
Like
crazy to
Machida
think,
towards
right?
Machida towards the end of his UFC middleweight run was walking in at like 183.
Yeah.
And he was barely just, it's just like, I'll do a little cardio this week, So, yeah, it's possible that he might do it. And there's such a gap between the elite and the rest of the pack in both of those divisions. Because, look, I got the rankings right in front of me. And so right now, as we're recording this, right, number 1, Robert Whittaker, number 2, Paulo Costa. So even mathematically, it's like, yeah, I get it. Number 3,
Right.
Cannonier, who just lost to Whittaker. Number 4, Darren Till, who is kind of in no man's land right now. Number 5, Marvin Vettori, who just beat number 6, Jack Hermanson. I don't see Marvin, as good as that performance he just had was, I don't see him breaking through.
Yeah.
And I don't see anybody else that's in the top 10, going through that. Derek Brunson, Kelvin Gastelum, Uriah Hall, Kevin Holland, maybe, might be able to crack into the top 5 with a win. And then Chris Weidman at 11. I mean, come on. Once you hit the Chris Weidman thing, that's you slam the emergency brake on. You know what I'm saying? This is like, you just crank that thing and you're turning the car around because there's no going back.
Yeah, of all the divisions, that's probably the largest gap between champion and number 1 contender. I mean, it's
either that or women's flyweight.
Well, yeah, that's right. You always got to throw, anytime you talk about talent gap or gap between 1 and 2 or whatever, you always have to bring up women's flyweight because Valentina is, Valentina's crazy dominant.
Yeah, it's not an indictment on the division. It's just that's how good Valentina is, and
yeah,
that she's a very special talent. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. So as we're talking about light heavyweight, obviously the man that reigned over the light heavyweight division for a long time, John Jones, is going up to heavyweight. Obviously, we're kind of moving on. We're using 2020 as support for whatever we say looking forward. What is John Jones going to do? I mean, I feel like the money fight is him and Ngannou, but that's not going to be for the title unless Ngannou wins. And the fight that most people want to see that would probably also become a money fight just for that reason is him and Adesanya, and I don't feel like he's wanting to go back to 205. So talk about being in no man's land. I feel like he's in no man's land.
It is weird, isn't it? For such a special once-in-a-lifetime talent like him to just say, I don't like this guy, therefore I'm not going to give him the pleasure of fighting him. Very strange. Very strange. He finally makes the move up to heavyweight, but it's on the ass end of him getting 2 very, very, very controversial wins in fights that, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not even saying this because of any personal animus towards the man or anything like that. But I think he lost both of those fights, man. The Thiago Santos fight, I definitely think he lost. The Dominic Reyes fight, yeah, he kind of lost that one. But it's the case for me is not as strong as the Thiago fight. And this is a guy who's, a dude who used to fight at middleweight, and both of his knees were shot. It's not a good look. So now is the time when the talent is finally catching up to you, when you're finally being figured out on in a different manner than what Gustafsson seemed like he was doing the first time around. Where do we go here? Okay, cool. You know what? I've vanquished all the threats. I'm moving up to heavyweight. But you got these asterisks around him, right? You've got the drug test failures. You've got, the behavior outside of the cage. Like, people are kind of wondering, is this going to affect it? Is this going to be a problem? Will this be brought up again? And as we've seen time and time again, he's game. He's ready to get back in there and do whatever. But the problem is, who does he fight now? If he fights Ngannou, I mean, it's a pretty marquee matchup, but you want to have John Jones headline a pay-per-view. And they're not really big on having a non-title fight headline pay-per-views. So does he fight Stipe in the interim? Do they wait to see what happens with Ngannou, and then if he wins, he gets the John Jones fight? Is that the fight that fans really, really, really want? Because, the main thing that I've seen that everyone's been clamoring for, that most people have been clamoring for with much more fervor, is the Adesanya fight.
Yeah.
Because here you have 2 singular talents Both of them, people who came in and exploded onto the scene. They've both had, this attitude and this edge to them, and they're just very, very intense athletes. And now you have someone that you can say, okay, John might have, he might have been on some shaky ground with the past two opponents that he faced. But if he fights this guy, who is much more coordinated, who has the cardio, who has the takedown defense, might not have the muscle mass, but it hasn't stopped him from beating these other bodybuilder-looking dudes in the past.
Yeah.
Guy, you know what, dude? Like, this dude seems like a far greater threat than, say, a slower Ngannou who's got holes in his wrestling game. Or, I don't know if he'd be able to overwhelm Stipe, how that would look. But, yeah, I think it really all depends on what the UFC decides to do, because they've got him in a holding pattern.
Yeah, I think if the UFC is smart, they put him straight away in with Stipe, because that's really the only fight that makes sense. If you put him in against Ngannou, you're going to flame one of your stars out, right? You'll get that pay-per-view, but then you don't have anything else after that, because whoever loses that fight is pretty much a goner. If John loses, then where does he really stand at heavyweight? To me, he stands nowhere, right? It really kind of does not work out for him. And if Ngannou loses, well, now he's already lost to Stipe. I think you get 2 fights for Stipe if you put Jones in with Stipe first. Not fair to Ngannou, I get it, but if Jones isn't going to entertain Adesanya, then I want to see him fight Stipe. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, I think Stipe is the one that's going to come out smelling like a rose here, because I think he can beat. We've seen him beat Ngannou, and I think he can beat Jones as well. I think it's going to be a different ball game when he sees a guy that can hit like Stipe can hit. Remember, let's not forget, Stipe knocked out a true blue bona fide heavyweight off his back foot, backing away, right? He slept Fabricio Verdum, who is a all-out, full-blown heavyweight, stepping backwards with a short hook. So at the end of the day, I think Stipe is going to come out smelling like a rose. I think people are sleeping on just how good Stipe is.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, because the thing is that if we look at how hard Dominic Reyes was able to hit him in the pocket, and John was able to wear some of that damage, but it wasn't fun. He didn't.
Yeah.
He struggled with that, and so you get another guy that hits like a truck, and who's got more sound boxing than Dominic Reyes, who's able to control his cardio, who's able to hold that pressure and wrestle. It's a different ballgame, dude. I would agree.
And Stipe can anti-wrestle, right? Some guys are good at just wrestling. Some guys are good at anti-wrestling, which is, we're going to keep this fight standing, or they can use their wrestling to get into the positions that are favorable to them, either on the ground to wrestle and do ground and pound, or keep it on the feet. And I think Stipe is very, very good at that. Whereas John Jones, if he has to stand and trade with Stipe, that feels like a long night out.
Yeah, a few things would have to go really, really wrong for him to style on him. Things would have to go wrong for Stipe, I should say. It's not, let's not ignore the guy and the progression that he's made. He's flourished brilliantly in his career, and I think he's a far smarter fighter than people give him credit for. I think it's just he doesn't have that. He's not looking for that loud superstar factor, so he doesn't quite possess that. And a lot of people overlook a lot of the things that he does best. I'm sad that it doesn't, that he's not really given the kind of respect that I feel the UFC should be giving him. And really, it would be a boon to him to have Jones off the bat, because he's a champion. He'd be fighting a former champion who did not lose his belt in the cage. It's easy money for you to say, okay, here's not quite champion versus champion, but in spirit it is, right? Because there's a guy who just simply decided to drop the belt and he gets in there, immediate title shot. I don't think too many people would complain. For him to go in there and fight the number 2, who would be Ngannou, I mean, it could work, I guess, but, they don't really operate on merit. It's really on what makes the most financial sense. I think that's maybe the biggest money fight that you could get for Stipe right now, and I'm not sure that they really want to reward him, so to say.
I think
I don't know.
I think from a money perspective, I think the Jones fight, if Jones is not going to fight Adesanya, which it appears he isn't, the big money fight for the UFC is him and Stipe for the title, right? Or him and Ngannou. But again, then you kind of crush one golden goose, right? And
Yeah, probably.
For Stipe's sake, he's going to make Stipe's. If I'm Stipe, right, I'd be campaigning to fight Jones because that's going to net him a heck of a lot more money than Ngannou. Not to mention he's already beaten Ngannou, so I don't think he feels the same. Uh, you know, yeah, it's easy money, but I still got to get in there with a guy who hits like a truck.
Yeah, I suppose we also have to factor in, is Stipe getting pay-per-view points? That's not a guarantee. It's
Mm.
possible that he might, maybe he's not. It's very likely that he might, have some sort of negotiation for a flat fee that you gamble on yourself. Like, look at what Ryan Bader's doing right now. Like, he'd much rather do, make 200 grand guaranteed than roll the dice on a pay-per-view, which you don't really know what kind of advertising. I mean, this is something that I mentioned on Twitter as early as late as earlier today. BT Sport has an excellent promo on the McGregor fight. It's purely focused on McGregor. It's this cartoon thing. And I said, look, BT Sport is more invested in actually promoting the UFC than the UFC itself, because they're not going to do you any favors. Like, look, these three letters are what you're going to buy into, and that's it. Like it or leave it. When they could actually push and promote some of these stars a little more and make more money, Stipe would benefit from having more pay-per-views, but they don't seem to really care since they're getting this massive cash influx for the ESPN deal that they've got.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the UFC has always been, they've I think they've learned their lesson, so to speak, with McGregor, who's become a star that really transcends the UFC brand, and they realize that can become very expensive very quickly. So
Well,
so we
yeah,
need to make sure that the UFC, like you said, those three letters are what people are buying, not.
well, they got lucky, and by lucky I mean Connor self-sabotaging and throwing the dolly at the bus. That was the only way they could really get him under control, and that to them must have been a godsend, because that's no more boxing, no more anything. Now you're on a short leash,
Yeah.
and I suspect it's still like that to a degree, even though he's got certain sway.
Yeah, he's a tremendous figure, but yeah, his flame has flickered a little bit since the whole Dolly incident. Um,
That's putting it generously. Yeah.
hey, before we go down to the lower divisions on the men's side, let's look at the women's side. Um, I know they're trying to do well. Let's start at the top. Amanda Nunes in the featherweight division. Okay, let's move on. Amanda Nunes
Yeah.
in the bantamweight division. It's really unfortunate that we don't have any real featherweights. They've never really developed that division. They don't even have rankings for it. Um, as a featherweight, who would you most like to see Amanda Nunes fight? Since there's no rankings, you can pick anyone from any organization, anywhere. Heck, if you know about Tammy down the street and you think she'd give her a good scrap, you can nominate her.
I don't think there's any real featherweights available other than Anderson, and I don't know that she'd be able to give her as competitive a fight as she is, as we would want. And that's not a knock against Anderson. She just started in the fight game way later, and I mean, she's charming, she's smart, she's really got a good head for this game. I remember I interviewed her a couple of years ago, and she's got a sense of dedication that is unshakable. But the talent gap again, and she's the only fighter that I see there that's actually a 145. Like Norma Dumont got signed, but she's really, I think she's back down to 135 at this point.
Yeah.
Like you've had a few people like Tanya Evinger, who was mostly good at 135, and then by the time she got to the UFC, a lot of the wear and tear of the fight game kind of got to her, and she didn't do as well as she would have hoped, and she got crushed in that fight by Cyborg. This was a division that was created for Cyborg. Let's not make any mistake here.
Yeah.
And that never really seemed to, it was cursed from the beginning when we had the Randami versus Home fight, and that was a stinker, and that was rife with controversy. Finally, we eventually get, Jermaine drops the belt, Cyborg gets it, and then, of all things, she's the one who gets knocked out, the woman who looked indestructible for well over a decade and a half. It's insane. But now she's out of the picture, and she's with Bellator for probably good reason. I don't know really they can't. I don't know why they haven't tried to shutter the division. I don't
Yeah.
see anybody else that they can. I don't see. There's no hot free agent at 145. Like where are we? And I don't quite know why that is, because there's so many women that have like this average frame and that could be fighting comfortably at 145, but you don't really see them in MMA. I think a lot of the smaller women are the ones that have been competing. A lot of the we're seeing less and less of these women that start getting into combat sports after high school and college.
Hmm.
We're seeing a lot more of them that start getting into grappling earlier, or they start, boxing in their dad's garage when they're 8, and then they start having a little bit more. The formative period starts far younger, and their development is much richer because we're not in the pioneer days. We're not even in things how they were in 2014, say, where women weren't getting too many fights because there wasn't as much exposure. Now there's gyms everywhere, and women can train everywhere. They can find high level coaches in any major city in America. But it just doesn't seem to happen for 145, and I'm not quite certain why that is. I wish I had some explanation, but I don't.
I don't, it's not often that in fact, I can't think of any other time that I would say this, but I would have loved to have been inside the head of Dana White when he set up the 145 division, because you're right. It was set up for Cyborg, and he brought the 145 division to the UFC for Cyborg. But then the acrimonious relationship between Cyborg and the UFC and the lack of bringing in more talent, he only, I think at any one time, he didn't have any more than 20 featherweights on the roster. Well, you can't have a division with just 20 people. And
No, no.
I love Megan Anderson, and I think she's probably the closest one to give Amanda Nunes a fight. But, geez, I don't even know what the formula would be for her to beat Amanda Nunes, because Amanda probably hits harder. Amanda would probably be better on the ground. In scrambles, Amanda would be better. I mean,
She's faster.
she's
She's more
faster.
spry. Yeah.
I mean, I just don't, I don't see it. I'm at a point with Amanda and kind of with Valentina as well, where I think the only thing that's going to stop them from winning a fight is themselves, an injury, not caring, not really putting in all the training. Although I don't know how the hell that would happen, especially with Valentina, because it seems like that's all that chick does is train, and she doesn't care who the next person is. Valentina truly has that mentality of every opponent is a faceless, nameless opponent. They are just an opponent that she has to beat. She doesn't seem to get caught up in anything that the other person brings to the table. She just trains her ass off, executes a game plan, and actually, I don't think she executes a game plan for that person. She executes her game plan over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, and the talent gap is why you can do that. And I think we've essentially covered women's featherweight and flyweight. There's 2 in 1 right there.
Yeah. Moving down a little bit further to strawweight, and I do want to touch on atom weight because I don't know as much about atom weight as you do, but I do want to touch that. Wiley Zhang is fighting Rose Namajunas. That's the next strawweight big fight, right? Am I right about that?
It seems to be that's still being talked over. It's either that or perhaps Wiley fighting Carla Esparza. So those are the 3 names that are in the hat right now.
Wow, I don't know that I want to see that. I don't know that I want to see Wiley against Carla Esparza. I feel like
I'd watch it.
Yeah, no, don't get me
I'd watch
wrong.
it. I would watch it.
I'm a degenerate. I'll watch it, but I feel like Wiley versus Carla has a lot of Joanna versus Carla, and that was almost uncomfortable because Carla is extremely tough, I think, but her stand-up is not going to withstand. It didn't withstand Joanna years ago, and I don't think it's going to withstand Wiley either. That seems like a bad idea.
Well, here's the thing. Carla has improved, and she did have a short notice. Well, that was short notice. She didn't have a full camp. She was going through a bunch of stuff with a quick turnaround in that fight against Joanna. So I don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be that one-sided. I do think that she's at a serious disadvantage in a few areas, but I don't want to completely write her off because I've seen the work that she's done. I'm a believer in the work that Colin Oyama and his crew have been able to do with some of their guys, and the improvements that I've seen from pretty much all these other cats. And she's got a good stable of training partners. He might actually pull it off. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where I at least want to see her try because there's a very compelling case for her to be able to do far better than most people expect.
Yeah, that's true. She has improved quite a bit since then. I will tell you this: I don't care who gets the next shot, and I don't care what this person's recent run of fights is, but just make Michelle Waterson fight for the title. I don't care if she's on a 2-fight losing streak. I don't care if she matches up terribly against Wiley. I don't care if it's against Rose. I don't care. I want to see Michelle Waterson get her shot at the title. I feel like she's deserved it for a while. And while I don't have tremendous hopes, or I don't think she'd be a favorite against Wiley Zhang, I still want to see it. I think it'd be great to see her get a title shot.
Maybe. I'm not sure she's quite there yet, but I mean, I suspect it wouldn't be that difficult with another win for her to get that.
I agree, but I'm going to be biased because I think I just love watching her interviews. She's just the happiest person. I mean, Roxanne's the happiest person on the planet. Roxanne Modafferi is absolutely the happiest. She's the happiest person I've ever seen ever. But there's something about Michelle Waterson that is just, I just want to see her get a shot. So I'm admittedly being biased, but oh well, so be it.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the men's side. Let's work our way down. Let's start at welterweight. We already talked about middleweight and light heavyweight. At middleweight, Kamaru Usman's a great champion, and I think he's going to be champion for a while. His striking is getting better. His wrestling and his ability to control people is insane. I don't know who's going to be next for him. Have they said he's not signed for a title fight just yet. It's supposed to be Gilbert Burns at some point, right?
Yeah. It's fairly soon. I think it's in March. I think they might have finalized that. I don't quite remember, but I remember seeing something about that. So yeah, it should be that.
That's gonna be a good fight.
Excellent fight. Excellent fight.
The other fight that I really want to see in the welterweight division is Colby Covington and George Masvidal. Look, that fight sells itself. What are they waiting for?
I don't know. I think it's money. I think the holdup is money. I mean, really, Hothead deserves a fair payday, and Covington, they don't seem to have that kind of love for him that he wants to project that they have. It's an easy thing to sell, like you said, because of they've already got the instilled feud. They're finally at a comparable point in the division. Sure, why not? I mean, I'd watch Masvidal fight Leon Edwards right now. Like that. I think that would also be a great fight. But I don't know. Fine. Like, I think this is more a matter of, like, look, at least this dude is going to – Hothead's very cringe, but at least he'll be able to shut up this other guy who's been in just a very relatively stale and one-note loudmouth to a lot of fans who don't seem to have that kind of love for him.
Cringe versus cringe.
In a way. I mean, Hothead's kind of cool, but – He's gone off the deep end with this political stuff to the point where it's like, oh, okay, buddy, we forgot why we were even here to see you, and this is a problem.
Yeah, I think he's outkicked his coverage. I mean, I think he's gotten to the point where he thinks his popularity absolves him of, all of a sudden gives him the right to try to be a political figure, and no one wants that.
Thing. You can do that. You can expand. I don't mind someone sharing their thoughts on things and having opinions that are different from others. But when you see that this dude falls for like every fake image and every like easily debunked thing, you're like, okay, your view of the world is rooted in team mindset and not an ideology that's formed based on a worldview from facts and consequences and checks and balances. And so that really it's really unfortunate because, like, dude, how can you be so loud and wrong about every single thing? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't, but I mean, it's the way of the world, unfortunately. Some people just can't be helped.
Yeah, well, it's one of the beauties of this world, and sometimes we have to hear it, right? It's that free speech thing. Sometimes we kind of wish we didn't have it.
No. The free speech is fine. The problem is that there's consequences to that speech, and
Yeah.
he's not. I don't think anyone. I don't think he should be limited from expressing his opinion. I want him to read a book. I want him to learn and be and do. I want him to, like, all this. You have all this access to the information. The internet is right there for you, my guy. Like, you can find that maybe some of the stuff you might want to challenge some of your beliefs.
Yeah.
There are people that just don't.
Yeah. He does not get himself educated. Hey, let me ask you, one of the breakout stars of 2020 was Hamzat Shemaev. And I'm curious your thoughts on him, where he kind of falls in the not necessarily in the rankings, but like, where do you want to see him go next? I always get kind of torn with guys like this. Like, sometimes I want the UFC to bring him up nice and slow so that we can really get behind the guy and really learn the story and see what he can do. And then sometimes I'm like, hey, this guy's great. Put him in there with Leon Edwards, or put him in there with Colby Covington. Let's feed him to the fire and let's go. Because this guy's all that in a bag of chips. Where do you fall on Hamzat Chimaev?
Yeah. Well, here's the problem. He fought Reese McKee, who's a very promising young prospect out of Europe, but still very green and rough around the edges. And then he went in there against, I believe it was John Phillips, was it?
Yeah.
I can't quite remember right now. Yeah, John Phillips, and no disrespect to the guy, but he's not really anything super special. Then he knocks out Gerald Meerschaert, who's not known for having an iron chin exactly, and not known necessarily for having the best stand-up. So you're going to rush this kid, and this is what happens. They don't really protect their prospects, unless it's someone like Giga Chikadze, who I mentioned recently on the Level Change podcast, where we talked about how he was one of the few guys that they brought in from Contender Series and have slowly nurtured him and brought him along. And he's doing okay. He's quietly racking up some wins, and that's fine. But they really want to see these guys who rack up these big finishes against lower level guys and think that they're going to be able to replicate that when they toss them into the deep end, and they won't. It just doesn't. We saw what happened with Edmund Shabazian.
Yeah.
We're going to see that happen with this guy. Leon Edwards is not a joke. This dude is a very complete, very well-rounded, just a very talented guy. Pardon me, my allergies have been kicking my ass all month. I just don't really think he gets past Edwards. I think Edwards has the anti-wrestling. I think he's got the striking chops. He's got the defense. He's got the chin. He's got the sort of things. Like, I like to compare this, and you're a baseball guy. You're from New York. You remember this. Chuck Knobloch. Mm-hmm. You remember what Chuck Knobloch was famous for? What would he do? When the pitcher was winding up, he'd stop, adjust his gloves. Ready? Let's go. Stop, adjust his hat. Stop, fix his sock. And that sort of thing would throw the pitcher off. His whole vibe would be messed up. And Edwards has ways of doing that. You stop the guy before he starts. You catch him on his back foot. You catch him as he's moving forward. You hit him with a hook off the pivot. You leg kick him when he thinks you're going to go for a takedown. All these things are there. All these tools and abilities are there. And Chimaev, as good as he is, I think he's still just very, very raw. He's had the benefit of feasting on some of the lower level guys and looking brilliant against them, but you have no guarantee that he's going to look like that against anybody that's in the top, let's say, 5 right now. Can he do that sort of thing against Wonder Boy? No, I don't think so. Can he do that against Masvidal or even Tyron Woodley, who's at number 6? I don't know. I doubt it. And this is a Woodley that I think, frankly, is quite shot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's weird. I'm really torn, and I think Leon. I think setting up Leon Edwards and Hamzat Chimaev is actually a lose-lose for both guys. For Leon Edwards, if he wins, he's not going to get a whole lot of boost because aside from adding to his win streak here recently, which currently sits at 8, I believe, it's not going to do much for him because the guy's ranked 14th, right? And he's got 3 fights in the UFC. And for Hamzat, ironically, he's not going to get a boost from it either unless he absolutely flashes brilliance because somehow Leon Edwards doesn't command the respect of a top 5 fighter. And I'm with you. The thing that's so impressive about Leon Edwards is he's very unorthodox. So whereas, his stand-up is very crisp, very good, but he does do a lot of stuff, kind of counter to what you normally see. And he's always kind of giving you what you don't expect. The leg kick when you're expecting a 1-2, things like that. He's very, very difficult to figure out, and he's developed into really a quite a jigsaw puzzle in the striking game. So as much as I want to see the fight, because, well, I always want to see the fight, I feel like it's a lose-lose for both guys. The only upside is if Hamzat just runs right through Leon Edwards, which I'm with you. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think there's going to be a lot of surprise because nobody falls for the hype that the UFC creates for a fighter like the UFC.
That's true. That's true. You mentioned Tyron Woodley, and that's an interesting one. I wish Tyron Woodley would do more wrestling. I'm really nervous that he might be a little shot worn and maybe not for the top 5 anymore. What's a good matchup for him going forward?
I don't know, dude. Good matchup for him would be, training at his own gym and stepping out. That's I don't see anything good for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, it looks tough. Chiesa and Magny are fighting this week, next week.
I think it's next week. I can't. The time is fluid for me right now, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is it
you can't ask me these questions while I'm sober. You can't do that and expect me to stay coherent, Jack.
I thought maybe it was because we haven't had UFC for 2 or 3 weeks. I'm kind of lost too, because it's really weird to not have a fight card to look forward to every single weekend.
Oh no, I'm always this terrible.
Well, anyway, Chiesa and Magny are up next. That's probably the biggest fight other than Leon Edwards and Chimaev, if that happens. I think they've pushed that back to March, right? And obviously the title fight, but
I believe so, yeah.
Chiesa and Magny. I feel bad for both of those guys because I think a win, even though it would be a great win for them, I don't think that really gets them into the top 5. What do you think?
I don't know, dude. I don't know, especially with the rest of the movement in the division. It seems super and of course, looking at who does the rankings, I'm not sure how that works for anybody. So I really don't know that I have an answer for that until we actually see any sort of actual any sort of traction in the cage. I mean that's really going to be it. So yeah, I think it depends on how they look.
Yeah. Both of those guys deserve with a win. I think they both deserve a top 5 guy. I just don't know that they're going to get it, because those top 5 guys are all kind of matched up with each other. Let's move on to lightweight, where Khabib is still the champion, although he says he's retired. We've got Poirier McGregor. we've got Poirier McGregor in about 10 days. I think they're going to make Poirier McGregor for an interim title by the time we get to the 23rd. Let's start at the top. Is Khabib done or not?
I think he's done. I think that's it. He's done. Look, a lot of people say they're done, but Dana White is a toad. He doesn't understand that you can't just throw money at people to make them do what you want. Even if you throw more money, there are people. He's made and hopefully saved a fair amount of money and has other avenues for his income. So I don't really think he needs fighting. I don't think he wants to keep doing it if he's done and he's still young and he wants to live his life and just be a dad. I'd understand that too, man. Listen, if I had a couple of million sitting in the bank, I'd fuck off and stay home and be a dad too, because that's my favorite shit right there. That and training. That's all I want to do. Just give me that. Let me play video games and do this shit and read books. I'm good, Jack. Let me explore, man. Let me just see the world. And that's what he has that. Lose me again?
Yeah, just momentarily. Yikes.
Okay. That's okay. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's that. I think Dana's just not used to guys really sticking to their word, and he's misreading this as, oh, I just got to throw another $2 million and he'll take it. And it's like, no, this is more a sign of Dana and the UFC needing Khabib more than Khabib needing them.
Yeah.
because he is the biggest superstar by far. You can keep your Conor McGregor's. This guy in the Muslim world, this man has been a phenomenon that the UFC could never expect. They stumbled upon it accidentally, and here it is. Here's this guy, and he's deciding to walk out on his own terms, and they don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to stay retired. He's got more money than he ever dreamed he would have, and when mom says don't do this without your dad, I mean, shit, it's not his buddy. It's not his buddies telling him not to fight. It's his mother, and he's a very close knit family man, and I can see that being done. He doesn't like the idea of rematches, but so the only real options for him if he doesn't want to rematch somebody is Charles Oliveira and Dan Hooker, Tony Ferguson maybe. But the Ferguson fight, he probably doesn't want to deal with that anymore. Oliveira probably doesn't get him out of bed in the morning, and Hooker's probably a couple fights away. So, the only other thing would be money, right? And that would be McGregor, and I don't think he wants to go through that again. So I think he's done. I think there's a fair chance that by the time we get to the 23rd of January, they designate that Poirier-McGregor fight as an interim title fight.
See, I'm not 100% certain, and I'll say that because they really want to keep that flame on for Khabib, because they know they really want to pursue this, and they're going to keep going until, I don't know, until it's just untenable, because they really think that they're going to be able to entice him to come back for more money because of how much money he's able to make for them.
Right. Who do you match up Charles Oliveira with? I mean, I feel like if you're Charles Oliveira at this point, you just kind of sit and wait and get a title shot. But with the champ saying he's not the champ, and there being no interim champ or no interim fight forthcoming, Oliveira is really in a tough spot. Who does he fight next?
The only fight right now in the top 5 that makes any sense for him. He just beat Tony Hooker, he just beat Tony Ferguson, who's number 5, and Conor is at number 4 fighting Dustin, who's number 2. So Oliveira at number 3 would probably have to fight Justin Gaethje. I mean, that's the only fight he's not going to go back. He's not going to fight Hooker or Rafael dos Anjos. It doesn't make sense for him to do that unless somebody is, unless he's set to fight Gaethje and Gaethje slips on a banana peel and they have to have a late replacement. I don't see him fighting anybody else. But Justin also has an argument for not having to sit out and maybe getting another shot after the beatdown he put on Tony. I don't know, dude. I don't know. I guess it's going to be a matter of plug and play, whichever one the UFC deems to make them more money after the outcome of this upcoming fight. And again, if it remains a non-title fight, you have an even bigger logjam at the top of the division because none of them is going to get the belt.
The other wild card in the division that I'm very excited to see is Michael Chandler. Now, when we've seen UFC guys go to Bellator, we haven't, how do I say this? It seems like we haven't gotten the best version of that guy when they go over there. I don't think we're going to have that problem here. I think we're very much going to get the best version of Michael Chandler here, but I'm not quite sure where he's going to fit in this lightweight division. He fights Hooker next. Is that fight signed and sealed, or?
That's correct. Yeah, that's happening, and that's happening fairly soon. I don't know. That's going to be interesting too, because Hooker brings another set of problems that Chandler may be equipped to handle, but he's been through some serious wear and tear and some wars. The only Bellator fighter, I mean, if you really want to call him that broke through and made it to the top of the UFC was Eddie Alvarez. And I mean, that guy was an anomaly because he was Dream and then eventually Bellator, and he was this thing that wasn't quite. He was the face of Bellator for a little bit, but he wasn't quite the homegrown talent. Then you have someone here in Chandler who has weaknesses and deficiencies. His durability is up there, but he can be put away. And Hooker is a guy that might be able to do it and figure him out. I'm not quite sure where he goes, even if he wins against Dan Hooker, where he goes from here. I mean, is he going to be relatively undersized against someone like Justin Gaethje or Tony Ferguson? Is he going to be worked by somebody like a Dustin Poirier with the cardio and the just all-around game? I don't know. I don't really like the possibilities for how he's going to be here because this is kind of the tail end of his career.
I know he was coming in to be a serious contender, so I'm not surprised he got a tough fight. But to me, Hooker's got to be just about the toughest fight he could have gotten, simply because you're getting a guy who's ranked number 6. So I don't think you're going to get a title shot off that win, but a guy who is as durable as they come, as tough as they come, and a guy who will stand and bang with you for 25 minutes, a guy who's been through the wars and understands what it's like to go through a main event fight. So it's not like Chandler will have that advantage over him. It really, I mean, talk about getting thrown into the deep end with no life preserver. That's it. I mean, that to me, that's the definition of the deep end.
Yeah, it kind of is. It just doesn't look good, man. It's like you're really throwing this dude into the wood chipper and hoping that he's able, and he took a gamble on himself. Like he admitted essentially to, we didn't quite use the word pay cut. He didn't use the term pay cut, but he's taking comparably less pay just to be able to have the opportunity to be in the UFC and gamble on himself. There's a lot of tremendous amount of confidence in himself, and I respect that. But yikes!
Is there anyone in the lightweight division not in that top 5 that you expect to make a splash in 2021? I feel like lightweight is so deep. You've got guys all the way down to 15 that, man, you just don't know. One of them could make a run. You got your eyes on anyone?
It's deep, but I don't see much fluctuation right now because the top 7 are so solid right now, and I'm not counting out Dos Anjos. I mean, he's probably arguably. I mean, he's at number 7 right now, but you look at who else is there, dude. It's like, yikes. I don't see Paul Felder popping in, sneaking out through the back door. Diego Ferreira could make some noise, but I don't really see him getting into the top 3, at least not now. Al Quinta, we've seen his limitations. Kevin Lee, same thing. Dariush, same thing. Makachev, not quite there. I just don't see either one of these guys making that burst away from the rest of the pack to make that happen.
I think Makachev might. If Khabib really does stay retired and Makachev becomes the focal point at AKA, I think, obviously that's a very, very good camp. I think he could, by the end of the year, really be a guy that we're talking about possibly getting a title shot because, look, we've seen Khabib do it. That wrestling and that hold you down and maul you tactic is it's effective even against the best strikers, even against the best submission people. And Makachev is, learning from the very best, headed down that path. I think if he can stay healthy, he could be a real problem, especially like I said, now that he's the focal point at AKA. I think, iron sharpens iron.
Well, let's see how it works out. I mean, it's certainly possible.
Let's go ahead and move on to featherweight, where is Alexander Volkanovski the most disrespected champion we have? I mean, it feels like him and Jan Blachowicz just get no respect. Part of it with Volkanovski is he beat a really popular guy in Max Holloway, a very personable character in the UFC. Guy that I think fans just naturally, Max Holloway's a guy that they just like to see on their screen. He's just a fun guy, and Volkanovski doesn't seem to get any respect after beating him twice. And really now he's got to fight Brian Ortega, and quite frankly, I think people will be more interested in Brian Ortega than Alexander Volkanovski. What do you think?
I still think Stipe is the most disrespected champion, but I'll grant you this: this Ortega surge in support has more to do with how good he looked in his recent matchup and how he was able to outclass Korean Zombie. And I don't really see much upward mobility for too many guys in that division right now, other than right now Shane Burgos, Dan Ige, who's a sensation, Sadiq Youssef perhaps. And, we're seeing Calvin Kattar make some waves and kind of, sneak in there as he's currently sitting pretty at number 6. other than that, I'm not sure that there's, maybe Zabit might be another interesting and complex challenge for Volkanovski, but I don't really, um, yeah, I don't really see anybody taking the belt from him right now. Not anybody in the top five, at least.
With Zabit, it's kind of weird with Zabit, right? Because he was kind of on that trajectory to a title shot, and now he didn't even fight in 2020. Boy, Zoom is really kicking us around. The good thing is, this has happened before, and I know it's all recorded, so I'm not too
That's
terribly
okay.
worried. I'm not worried, but I'm not happy
Okay,
either.
so who are you stating? Who you were asking me if somebody had fought in 2020?
Zabit, did Zabit fight in 2020? I don't think he did.
I don't even remember. I don't think he did. He was out with some injury, I believe, and I don't really know. Um, I'm not really sure that he's got. I mean, he's certainly got a lot of. He's got great finishing instinct. I worry about his ability to endure the kind of physicality and pace that Volkanovski can put on in the championship rounds.
I feel like Zabit was on his way to getting a title shot, and now I think he's actually taking a step back by not fighting in 2020. And now I think he's gonna need one more fight before he gets that shot. And the way things shake out right now, most of those guys are already booked up. Does Kattar get a title shot if he beats Holloway this weekend?
I don't know that he'd get a title shot outright. He's probably one fight away. I mean, it doesn't seem to me like it's. I'm just looking up here. Zabit did not, in fact, fight in 2020. So I would not have gone to sleep comfortably if I had left that alone. No, I don't think that really would be the case yet because you still have Ortega and Yair in the mix. I'm not sure that would really work out. I think he might get fortunate enough to break in as a young, fresh face, but I don't know. A lot of things could happen here. We're at the beginning of the year. It's possible. I don't want to write that possibility off.
Yeah, I really like Kattar. I like a lot of those Boston area guys. They seem to kind of be bubbling up to. A lot of those Boston guys seem to be bubbling up to the top of their respective divisions. So, I really like them going forward. I'm really looking forward to the fight with Holloway this weekend. At bantamweight, you got Peter Yan. Aljamain Sterling's finally going to get a shot at the title. Corey Sandhagen, Cody Garbrandt, Frankie Edgar, Rob Font. I mean, you got a lot of good names. I don't know who's going to be next for the champion. Should he beat Sterling, or who would be next for Sterling, aside from an immediate rematch if the fight kind of warrants it. Who do you think's the next up and comer there to get a title shot?
It's got to be Sandhagen. I will hear no argument to the contrary. This dude is doing so well. He's done so much in so little time. I have to imagine that he'd have to be the guy.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here. Do you still give him a title shot if Aljamain Sterling just, let's say Aljamain Sterling runs right through Peter Yan. There's no talk of an immediate rematch. Is Sandhagen the first challenge for him?
I would say so. Yeah.
Really? We just saw that fight not too long ago, and it lasted less than a round.
It'd still be interesting. They've both improved since then, and he's already, what else does he do? He's not going to take a step back.
I think with
then the
Aldo,
UFC likes the kid. They don't want it to, yeah.
I think with Aldo winning his last fight against Chito Vera, I think they may give Aldo another shot at the title. It seems like they like to give him shots at the title all the time.
And the funny thing is, he might just take it. But there's just something about Aldo where it's like the non-title fights are the ones where he shines the most.
Yeah.
And having him lose the featherweight title has made him even a greater buzzsaw, aside from the loss that he suffered in that interim. The wins he's looked exceptional in. So I don't want to discount anything when it comes to him, but I don't know. I don't really see him getting that shot. He'd have to probably get two really, really definitive wins for that to happen.
Another guy that I feel is always one win away is Frankie Edgar. Who is he scheduled to fight next, or is he scheduled to fight someone next?
I don't think he's scheduled to fight anybody yet.
No. I know there was some talk about him and Rob Font, but I think if he
I remember that, but I don't know. I don't think it was made definitive, and I don't really think that Edgar gets past Font.
Really? God, I don't.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing about Edgar against Munoz, and then he put on that performance against a guy who was really tough. And I don't. I've gotten to the point now where I've decided I no longer count out Frankie Edgar until he tells me he's done fighting. I'm not going to count him out.
Okay. I respect that. That's fair.
And then the flyweights, Figgy. Figgy has been super impressive. I think he's obviously with the draw with Moreno, he's obviously got to run that back. But who would be the next challenger for a title shot after Moreno?
I'm probably gonna have to say Brandon Royval seems like the most interesting fight, but he's down at number 6 right now. I don't think they make that fight. Um, I don't think Brandon gets past Figueiredo. I just don't see it right now. I think that there was a very respectable and very tight and close fight that they had last time around. I don't think it goes the same way next time. I think Davison figures him out. And probably another close bout, but I think he would win pretty clearly. So I don't. We saw the fight against Pantoja. I don't think that things would be that different in that one as well if they were to run it back. I'm just really interested in seeing Royval's ascent and see what happens, or maybe if Cejudo decides to come back, but there's no guarantees on any of that.
Yeah, it's really a shame. The only fight I want to see for Davison Figueiredo after Moreno is with Cejudo. I mean, I want to see that fight. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen because I think Cejudo is playing a money game and the UFC is not going to play the money game, or at least they're going to win the money game. So I don't know that it's going to happen. I like Brandon Royval. Unfortunately, he lost his last fight, so I feel like that now puts him, a fight or two away from actually challenging for the belt. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's near his peak yet, but I'll give it a bit of time.
Yeah, true. Well, hey man, that's about it. We've stumbled through some technical issues, but we've talked a whole lot of UFC. Victor, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. It has been a lot of fun.
Same, man. Same.
Talking MMA with you. Why don't you go ahead and tell the fans where they can find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter at Vic M. Rodriguez. Of course, I'm over at bloodyelbow.com. Just working on some more long type projects, very odd stuff, the bits and ends here, usually the funny stuff. But of course, we're at the Level Change podcast, and we're there every week. And you can always find us on wherever you listen to your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, all that good stuff, SoundCloud. 2 cans and a string, whatever the hell you got, we're there. And that's pretty much all I got, man. I just also recommend, if anybody trains jiu-jitsu, please, pretty please, or sugar on top, check out theslothreport.com. It's just how it sounds, theslothreport.com. One of my head instructors, one of my best buddies, Josh Vogel, he's got a newsletter there for $5 a month, an incredible back catalog with so much technique and training and just sound advice. I mean, the dude is a gem. He's a gentleman. He'd really appreciate your shekels right now, so make sure you put a drop in his bucket.
That's great, man. I'm gonna have to check that out. I like reading that kind of stuff and sharpening my jiu-jitsu game, even though I don't do any jiu-jitsu, right? But it's just nice to know how all that works. As always, folks, you can reach me on Twitter as well at eMontana21, and obviously you can catch this podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, all those podcast platforms. Once again, Victor, thanks a bunch. We're going to have to do this again. Maybe 6 months from now, we'll do it again, see how all of our talk from today is panning out.
Yeah. I'll be more than glad to join you, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. As always, folks, ignore the negativity. Be the positivity. Peace.